Well, I'm going to go over my Hammer Horror Collection, one of my all-time favorite production companies, only after Cannon Films. I definitely don't have every Hammer film ever released on DVD. I still have a lot to go, but you know, I do believe I have well over the average person has. Um, well, let's see. First up, we'll go over the four film favorites of Dracula. This has four of the Hammer Dracula films with Christopher Lee. In their Dracula genealogy, it has the first, um, fourth, fifth, and seventh entry in the series. Kind of bizarre, but that thing again, different companies own the rights to different films in the series. So, but it's nice to have a four in a cheap set like that. And then let's go to Anchor Bay double feature of two of their films in the Dracula series. We got the third Dracula film, the second one to feature Christopher Lee, Dracula Prince of Darkness, and the Satanic Rites of Dracula. Satanic Rites, that has it's a direct follow-up to Dracula AD 1972. I actually enjoyed this one a little more. It's got a over-the-top story about Dracula taking over the world with the bubonic plague. Quite silly, but I enjoyed it for that aspect. Let's see, and then we can probably skip to Frankenstein series for a bit here. Got, of course, their first entry, Curse of Frankenstein, Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee as Frankenstein's monster. Great film. Didn't like it quite as much as Horror Dracula, but can't get much better than that one. And over here we got Columbia Pictures. Sony released the second Frankenstein film in the series, The Revenge of Frankenstein. Fantastic sequel. One of the best in their Frankenstein series. Now we can skip over to here. This collection, the Hammer Horror series. I put off getting this because it's two double-sided discs, dual layer, with two films on each side, so there was a lot of glitch errors. A lot of people have problems with these discs, and I refused to buy it because of it. But it drove me up the wall not owning it because it has The Evil of Frankenstein, the third in the Frankenstein series, and The Brides of Dracula, the second in the Dracula series. I owned every other entry in the series except those two films, that drove me nuts not owning it. And I had a coworker actually give it to me. He said, well, if it doesn't work and it's defective, you're out no money. And he gave it to me, and surprise, every film played flawlessly. I could not believe it. I don't know if it's my DVD players are new enough to read through the errors, or I just got lucky, but wow, great collection. I got so lucky. Brides of Dracula, Curse of Frankenstein, Phantom of the Opera, Paranoiac, The Kiss of the Vampire, Nightmare, Night Creatures, Evil of Frankenstein. Has two suspense thrillers as opposed to horror films. Great collection, so glad. If you can get one that's defective free, oh my god, it's so worth it. Oh, and then let's see, we can go over here to another Anchor Bay double feature. This one has Frankenstein Created Woman, the fourth entry into their Frankenstein series, and the Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires, aka Seven Brothers Meet Dracula, their ninth and final entry into their Dracula series. Really good sequel. This one, not so good. It's a co-production with Shaw Brothers, the popular Hong Kong martial arts studio, so it's really bizarre in that aspect. The plot is so lame that Christopher Lee turned it down, so we get someone else playing Dracula, and he doesn't do a bad job, but as a Hammer film, this one's pretty bad. Continuity errors too. Peter Cushing returns as Van Helsing, but oh my god, there's so many continuity errors compared to the earlier films with this one that it'll drive you nuts. But and then we got Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed. Fifth entry into Universal's Frankenstein series. In my opinion, the best sequel. A lot of continuity errors, again, compared to the earlier ones. I mean, in the fourth film, he had gloves from burned hands. Did that happen from the ending to Evil of Frankenstein? But here his hands are fine. Just weird stuff like that. But Peter Cushing is ultra evil in this one, and I really enjoyed it, so in my opinion, the best of the series. Early Hammer horror film, The Mummy, again, Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee. Ironic, out of their original 3 films, Horror Frankenstein, this, and the Horror Dracula and the Curse of Frankenstein. This one's the weakest, but still a really good one. And it's not a remake of Universal's The Mummy. Ironically, it's a remake of Universal's sequels to that, The Mummy's Hand and The Mummy's Tomb. So that's kind of bizarre that way, but a really good one. Enjoyed that one a lot. The Mummy was followed by 3 sequels. In this collection from Sony and Columbia, you get 4 Hammer films. You get The Curse of the Mummy's Tomb, which is the second entry into Hammer's Mummy series. Scream of Fear, which is a thriller, mystery thriller. Two Faces of Dr. Jekyll, and The Gorgon. The highlights, of course, are the second Mummy movie and The Gorgon about Medusa. Really great collection. Highly recommend that one. Waited for that one to get released a long time so I could get the second Mummy movie. And then over here we got another Anchor Bay double feature, which has The Mummy Shroud and Plague of the Zombies. Mummy Shroud is the 3rd entry into their Mummy series. Still enjoyable. Basically a carbon copy of the first 2 films, but I still enjoyed it. Plague of the Zombies is probably their best film out of their mainstream films, outside of their mainstream Mummy, Dracula, Frankenstein films. I really enjoyed that one of the Hammer's best. Great double feature there. Oh, we can go over here. Got Anchor Bay's out-of-print release of Scars of Dracula, the 6th entry into their series. As you can tell, all the series are really mixed up, and double features and crap like that. Probably the most violent of the series, but this is when the Dracula series really started going downhill. This one and after, they're all below par. But a great DVD from Anchor Bay if you can find it. And then after the Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed, we have The Horror of Frankenstein, the only Frankenstein film made without Peter Cushing. And they tried to appeal more to a younger audience, so they cast Ralph Bates in it. And because of that, hardcore Hammer film fan, and it's a lot more comical. Hardcore Hammer film fans, you really hate this movie, and I can see it is kind of crappy what they did to Peter Cushing by kind of kicking him out of the series for this one entry, but you know, actually, in hindsight now, I actually really enjoy this film. I like the comical overtones. Ralph Bates is good. So I think this is one of Hammer's most underrated films. The Frankenstein monster in this is pretty crappy, but yeah, you know, I think this is one that's underrated. And this is the 6th entry into their Frankenstein series. And then we have the 4th and final entry into Hammer's Mummy series, Blood from the Mummy's Tomb, out of print Anchor Bay disc. This one is different from the other 3 because it doesn't have a shambling mummy in it. What? They made a mummy movie without a banded shambling mummy? No, but trust me, it's well worth it because you get the most beautiful mummy right there that you've ever seen. Based on a Bram Stoker story, so another underrated one in my opinion. We can jump over here to a double feature of The Devil Rides Out and Rasputin. Great double feature, Devil's Rides Out. That was really controversial at the time because it dealt with the subject matter of Satanism. Tame by today's standards, good movie, creepy. Really like that one. Rasputin, The Mad Monk. Didn't really like that one a whole lot. Christopher Lee gives a great performance, but not one of my favorite Hammer films. Oh, and then we can jump over to my Midnight Movie section right here. Keep that one in my Midnight Movie section instead. We got Countess Dracula and the Vampire Lovers. Ingrid Pitt. Oh, a bombshell of the day. These were made in the early 70s. This is when Hammer went to skin. They started showing nudity in their films. Some people love this era. Some people find this the downfall of Hammer and what killed him. Well, other films like The Exorcist and Texas Chainsaw Massacre were more extreme and more violent and had more nudity, and horror films were changing, so Hammer tried to change in order to, you know, still appeal to audiences. Countess Dracula, I didn't really like that one a whole lot. It's okay. But the real one, Vampire Lovers, that's the gem in this set. It's the first of the Karstein trilogy, followed by Lust for a Vampire and Twins of Evil. That's the highlight of this set. Definitely must get for the Vampire Lovers. And then we'll jump back up here, and then I have the sequel to Vampire Lovers, Lust for a Vampire, out of print Anchor Bay disc. Really hard to find. You know, this one gets crapped on a lot. I didn't think it was too bad. Not a bad sequel in my opinion. Really cannot wait for Synapse's release of Twins of Evil. Dying to see the third and final film in the trilogy. I've heard that one actually is the best film of the trilogy. Oh, we'll skip over here. We got Hammer's Frankenstein and the Monster from Hell, their 7th and final film in their Frankenstein series. After the debacle with Horror Frankenstein, they brought Peter Cushing back. The monster in this looks really crappy. This is my least favorite of the Peter Cushing entries, and to be honest, it is my least favorite Frankenstein film in their series overall. Disc is out of print, but not too hard to find. And then my final entry of my, let's see, Hammer horror films. Captain Kronos Vampire Hunter. This was out of print for a while, and I was lucky enough to score it for $2 at a pawn shop. This is one of their most underrated films. Came out in the early 70s. Really entertained by this one. It was supposed to be the first of a series, but sadly it didn't do that well at the box office, so all sequels are scrapped. There's actually a reference to the Karstein family from the Karstein trilogy, and this is really, if you want to be technical, this is probably a spin-off of that series. But and the only other really Hammer film I have is in this Sherlock Holmes triple feature, The Hound of Baskervilles with Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee. Great film. Hammer style is all over it. It is my favorite Sherlock Holmes movies ever made. But it's not horror, of course, so that's why it's not in that section. But there you go. That's all I have for Hammer horror. Definitely not complete. A lot more to go. If anyone has a copy of Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde, they're willing to sell me for a good price, let me know, because I am not paying like $100 for that one. But there's some more double features I can get and all that. But for now, that's all I got. Okay.